24 different players, whether you should be starting or sitting them in fantasy football this week. Will they make or break your week 3 matchup? We're going to cover quarterback starts and sits, running backs, wide receivers, and tight end. All the relevant positions you need. 24 different players, fellas. Let's start with the quarterbacks and our quarterback starts of the week. Cameron, I'll start with you. Who's your quarterback start, as the YouTube people can already see?
It's Joe Burrow, and I'll keep it really simple. First, Joe Burrow looked much better last week against Kansas City. He looked much more comfortable than he did in week 1. 23 of 36 for 258 yards and 2 touchdowns. There's a chance that T. Higgins is back in this one. We're recording this Wednesday night, so a lot of time between now and Monday night when they play. So we don't know for sure, but it sounds like he's trending that direction. But even if he doesn't, he's playing the Commanders, and the Commanders are really, really bad at stopping the pass. Washington has allowed a top 12 quarterback in 16 of their last 18 games. Jeez. They give up 30 to Baker in week 1 and 18.3 to Daniel Jones last week. And I just want to remind you, in the last 18 games, they've played the Giants 3 times. So that means they've had 3 Giants quarterbacks in that mix. I'm remembering right, 2 of them were top 12 quarterbacks. So they're just an awful pass defense, and so I'd be firing up Burrow this week.
I've been outspoken on my concerns around Joe Burrow's wrist injury. This is a matchup where it just washes any of my concerns away. That's how bad the Washington Commanders are. Ty, what about you? I got to assume you're in on Joe Burrow based on your quarterback 10 ranking for him this week.
Yeah, I think, we needed to see at least another week or at least one game where Joe Burrow looked like he had a chance of leading his offense to a victory. And that was very evident in that Kansas City game where it actually, again, 258, 2 touchdowns on 36 attempts. That's kind of a Burrow stat line where you're like, yeah, we're getting back to some kind of normalcy or what we're familiar with the guy. So I think Burrow is a great start. And this is such a smash matchup too, that if you don't, it's because you have a Jalen Hurts or a Lamar Jackson, which I don't know how you would, but again, sometimes you double up in quarterbacks. But again, Joe Burrow against Washington, that's just a easy start.
So Joe Burrow is a fairly big, popular, obvious name. Our next 2 quarterback starts are, I can't believe we're saying you should be starting them in week 3. If you would have said these were our week 3 starts, as Cameron, you mentioned in the podcast intro, I would have told you you're absolutely crazy. Tyler, who's your quarterback start of the week?
It's Derek Carr. Yeah, we're here. Yeah. We're talking about Derek Carr.
I can't believe this.
Yeah.
I can't believe this.
We, throughout the entirety of the preseason, we were hearing stuff that New Orleans offense seemed very basic, very vanilla, that there was not going to be much change or much different from, previous years. And then all of a sudden in the first 2 weeks of the season, this New Orleans offense is putting 40 plus in both games. And Derek Carr has been great so far this year. He's the quarterback 2 overall. Yep.
My mind's broken.
Yeah. And now here's the even crazier part about this. He's the quarterback 2 on the year, despite not having more than 23 pass attempts in a single game this year. The guy, they've not needed him to throw a ton, but he's been able to produce so far. He gets Philly this week. Philly's allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks so far this year. And this matchup is the 2nd highest point total of the week at 49.5. So again, who would have thought that we're talking about this New Orleans Philly matchup being a potential shootout? But I'm also expecting this to be a much tighter game, that it's not going to be so much of a blowout for the Saints as the first 2 weeks. So that just means that there may be some more Derek Carr, there may be some more passing, some more Chris Olave, like we've been kind of hoping for at this point. I think with what Derek Carr has shown so far, with what this Saints offense has shown, I think Derek Carr is a sneaky good start this week against a Philly secondary that really hasn't slowed down anyone, that literally just Kirk Cousins walk into Philly and, obviously win it on a 2-minute drill, but still, we talked about Kirk and his Achilles, and he went in there and balled out.
if you're without Jordan Love, Derek Carr is your number one streaming option this week. And Cameron, you're in alignment with that as your quarterback 13 ranking for Derek Carr this week.
Yeah, it's just wild. I mean, like Ty said, the dude's completed 30 passes on the season. There were 3 quarterbacks with more than 30 pass completions last week, and he's completed 30, and he's the quarterback 2. Had 11 completions last week, and is the quarterback 3. Yeah, and this Philly defense made Kirk Cousins look like prime Kirk Cousins again. On Monday night or on Sunday night, excuse me, they just could not stop. Was it Monday night or Sunday night?
Monday night.
I was
You're right.
I just got to trust myself. They just couldn't slow him down. They really didn't put pressure on him. And Derek Carr he's like any NFL quarterback. When he doesn't have pressure on him, he looks good in the pocket. So as long as he can continue to have a clean pocket, I think he's going to continue to produce for fantasy.
So we got down there with Derek Carr. I think this truly was the most unlikely player to be a start of the week in week 3, but also, I mean, I'm looking at my start of the week here, and I'm also thinking, I can't believe I'm already talking about Sam Darnold as my quarterback start of the week. I mean, this is truly like a hot take. Yeah, I mean, it is hot. I couldn't believe I made Sam Darnold my start of the week. Like, I'm gonna need a glass of milk after this. But here's the thing with Sam Darnold, okay? He's looked so good this year. I can't believe this in this Minnesota Vikings offense. Kevin O'Connell has him slinging the ball around the yard. Like, that throw to Jalen Naylor last week, pants were up. Like, I couldn't believe he threw that ball. It was a thing of absolute beauty. So we saw in week 1 a 56-point shootout between the Texans and the Colts. And this Vikings offense has looked significantly better than whatever the Bears have been rolling out as a sputtering offense under Shane Waldron. So considering Darnold's at quarterback 10 on the season and just hung 21 on the 49ers last week, give me a go with him at home against the Texans in week 3 here. I think this could be a sneaky high-scoring game. I'm willing to roll out Sam Darnold at quarterback this week if your waiver wire is looking pretty thin. Cameron, what do you think?
Yeah, I think honestly, my only concern is just the availability of both Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Just knowing, Jefferson's made it very clear that he thinks he's playing. So I think he's a guy you can trust. It sounds like he likely will be. He said he's not seriously injured. He said he's on track to play for Sunday. And not having Jordan Addison obviously would hurt a little bit, but Sam Darnold just proved, I can dice up anybody with Jalen Naylor, and Brandon Powell. So it's just, that worries me a little bit, but he's got enough rushing upside, and he showed that in that last game. I think that's the other thing is he had a 19 and a 16-yard run, I think. If he's going to put up 30, 40 rushing yards in a game, you got a decent little floor where, he's got to be a great streaming option this week.
Tyler, you only have him one spot behind me, quarterback 14. Are you willing to roll him out as a streamer this week with assuming Justin Jefferson plays? I do think that is the one contingency here that we have. If JJ doesn't play, I have no interest, but if Jefferson's out there, I'm willing to roll out Darnold.
Yeah, I think I would play Darnold over all of our sits. And I think most people may look at our sits and be like, are you sure? I think I'd rather play those guys. And it's like, oh no, I'm going Darnold over those guys this week.
Before we dive into those sits, I think it's a really good transition. We're going to stop and we're going to talk to the 93% as we always do at the start of our episodes, because 93% of you are consuming our content and you haven't subscribed yet. There's so much you're missing out on. All right. What I'm going to ask you to do, hit that subscribe button real quick. Turn on that notification bell as well. You'll be alerted when all of our newest content is up. We are out here trying to help you dominate your league mates. We're dropping episodes like this, trade targets, debating whether you should be panicked on certain players or not each and every single week. So much content to help you win. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. And same for our podcast as well. If you're on the audio feed, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, we appreciate those of you who are consuming our content responsibly and not watching a video while you drive. Way to listen to an audio feed instead. Just make sure you're subscribed over there so you know when our newest episodes are out. Let's move on to quarterback sits, fellas. Keep it moving here. Cameron, who's your quarterback sit of the week?
It's Baker Mayfield, and it makes me a little bit sad to say because I love Baker and I love this Tampa Bay offense. I think they are so much fun to watch. And obviously, having lived down in the Tampa area for the last 2 years, last year, I got a lot of chances to watch Baker. But against this Denver defense, I just don't know if this is the week I'd be rolling him out. I'm a little surprised that I'm the highest on him. That might be more of a reflection on me just being, saying he's a sit, but still being a little higher on him. But Pat Surtain has shut down the number one option against the two teams he's played so far. DK had 3 catches for 29 yards and Pickens had 2 catches for 29 yards. That means you're probably looking at limited Mike Evans this week. And I know he's only played, Geno Smith showed against New England. He's still got it. And then Justin Fields is the other quarterback they've played, but they've only allowed 289 passing yards on the season so far. So I just think, it's just not a great matchup. Yeah, I know Tampa Bay, and they showed, this last week they can win in gross games. Baker was 12 of 19 for 185 yards. So they showed, hey, we can be nitty and gritty if we need to. We can kind of, have a gutsy win. So I just think, and then on the last thing is this Denver rush defense isn't great, right? So they're just going to be able to run the ball more than they have been. And so I just don't think Baker's going to need to be as utilized as much in this one. I just don't think he's going to have as much success as he has.
Yeah, I was told Denver's run defense got better, and I haven't seen that yet this year. Ty, your thoughts on Baker Mayfield? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, let's not pretend that last week was a great week for Baker Mayfield. Again, against a Detroit defense on the road. But the guy was 12 of 19, 185, a touchdown and a pick. And what saved him was having 34 rushing yards on 5 attempts and a touchdown off of it.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to happen against Denver this week. So while he may not exactly be a bust this week, Baker will more than likely not be the reason why you win a matchup. So that's why I would, again, like we talked, Darnold. I would play Darnold because I think Darnold has that kind of upside that Baker does not.
Yeah, that sneaky dual threat ability that Baker Mayfield whipped out of nowhere last week is really, really what saved him. Speaking of dual threat, Ty, your quarterback sit of the week is maybe he's not considered a dual threat, but he's definitely considered a rushing quarterback. I'll let you talk about your quarterback sit of the week.
Yeah, Justin Fields should probably move out of your starting lineup at this point. Like, yeah, the rushing upside, the rushing ability is the only intrigue for a guy like Justin Fields at this point, but he has no rushing touchdowns so far this year. 57 yards on 14 attempts in week 1 and 27 yards on 8 attempts in week 2. Granted, they were playing from ahead in week 2 versus week 1 was a much closer matchup, but the rushing production that we kind of hoped he would have in an Arthur Smith offense just hasn't been there so far, right? Yeah. And it matters, but it doesn't really matter all that much when you're only throwing for 156, 117 yards and only 1 passing touchdown, right? So if anything, the rushing yards are saving him from completely busting on a week. This Chargers defense that he's going up against this week, they have shut down quarterbacks so far this year. Granted, it's been Gardner Minshew and Bryce Young, but Justin Fields is not exactly like
yes.
You're not wrong. I just think that, like, again, the rushing ability is always a cheat code in fantasy, but it's not a cheat code in this Arthur Smith offense. It's saving him at this point. It's been keeping him at this kind of middling level of production, and I don't think that's going to continue this week against the Chargers.
Yeah, he has yet to score 12 fantasy points in a single game this year. Anything you want to add on top of that, Cameron?
He feels like Desmond Ridder was last year. Like, I feel like he's been reduced to that in this offense. And so it's just like, would you have started Desmond Ridder against a team that's probably playing like a top 5, defense right now? Like, that's what the Chargers are playing. I'm not calling it a top 5 defense, but that's where they've been playing. And the answer is no, absolutely not. So why would you start Justin Fields in this one?
Yeah, 100% agree. Now, I'm going to throw out my quarterback sit of the week, and it's going to feel like these are three guys that are like, Lucas, I wasn't starting these guys anyways. In your standard 12-man leagues, you're probably not starting these guys, but consider a quarterback sits as guys who were not bothering trying to stream this week. And so my quarterback is Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks. And the thing with Geno is he's actually been good to start the year. He's been the quarterback 7 in both weeks to start the season, but I just don't anticipate Geno needing to throw 44 times in this game like he did in week 2. Miami's only given up 11 points to T-Law and just under 10 points to Josh Allen this year. Now, why is that? It's because they've run the ball relentlessly on this Miami Dolphins defense. That's where their weakness is right now. It sounds like the Seahawks will probably be without Ken Walker this week. If he does come back, that's only good news. And I think an even more validation to set Geno Smith this week. But then you look, Skylar Thompson's on the other side of the ball leading this offense. Sorry, he doesn't scream shootout to me, right? Like, I don't think this is going to be a back and forth game like we hoped it would be to start the year. And I think the Seahawks can just do enough damage with Zach Charbonnet. So I think it keeps Geno outside of streaming range this week, and I'm okay if you just let him be despite his hot start to the season.
Yeah, and you look at the names in that Miami secondary, Kendall Fuller, Jordan Poyer, Javon Holland, and Jalen Ramsey, right? I mean, that's a pretty high quality group that Seattle is going to have to face. Obviously, they look fantastic last week against the Patriots. Throwing the ball over the field. DK and JSN both having fantastic weeks. But like you said, it's just I'd be shocked if this Miami team with Skylar Thompson is able to put up enough points where Seattle's going to be in a shootout where they feel like, hey, we have to keep throwing the ball this week.
Ty, what about you?
Yeah, I this just has like low scoring game written all over it. And yeah, I think that the total right now is 41.5. I think it's an under on that. Like both defenses are really good at shutting down opposing quarterbacks. Yeah, like this just does not. There is really no reason why Geno should be a starting quarterback. Don't fall for the facade of last week.
Sorry, Geno, I'm writing you off this week. You can feel free to write back, but I will go ahead and write you off for only week 3 though. Okay, only week 3. I'll probably be back in on you in future weeks, but for now you can leave Geno on the waiver wire. Let's transition to the running backs here now, fellas. We've discussed our quarterbacks. Start with the starts of the week. Cameron, who's your running back start?
It's Brian Robinson Jr., and he's another guy that I had been pretty out on over the last two seasons. He's a guy that whenever I put as my sit, he somehow managed to get 30 carries for 100 and something yards and 2 touchdowns. So we're going to try the other way this time, and I guarantee, I was telling you guys before, this is the game he gets 17 carries for 19 yards and fumbles or something like that and get you negative points. But the dude has been on fire to start the season. 29 attempts for 172 yards and on 6 yards per carry. His coach, Cliff Kingsbury, used James Conner very similarly, down in Arizona, where Conner was fantastic from a fantasy perspective. And he stayed true to, hey, I might have a running quarterback, but when I'm inside the 5-yard line, I give it to my big bruising running back. Robinson's already tied for 4th with attempts inside the 5-yard line with 5 of them. So that's what he's just going to continue to do. And it's not like the Commanders have been in the red zone all that often this year so far, right? It's not like, hey, they're just living in the red zone. No, when they get there, they run the ball. And similarly to how Joe Burrow was a start because this Washington, pass defense was bad, this Cincinnati run defense is not good. Week 1, they allowed Ramondre Stevenson 25 carries for 120 rushing yards. This last week, Pacheco 19 carries for 90 yards. Right, I think Brian Robinson is going to continue to run the ball well against them, and yeah, I would find a way to get him in your starting lineup this week.
Take the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands. Don't make him throw all over you in this game, and you can do that by burning clock by continuing to feed Brian Robinson. I'm with you. I like him as a play this week. Ty, you clearly do too. You have him all the way up at your running back 16.
Yeah, I would just want to point out that Robinson does have a pretty low floor still this week, though, just because if Cincinnati gets out crazy early, then Brian Robinson, he'll be involved in the receiving game still, but it won't be again like what we saw last week, putting up over 130 rushing yards. So there is still a pretty low floor for Robinson. But to your guys' point, if Washington wants to stay in this game, it's going to have to be on the ground with Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I think that's why he's done at my running back 20. It's that I'm worried that they're going to be playing from behind in this game, and Austin Eckler is going to have to get in and catch, a handful of passes. So I think he all of a sudden becomes the primary back on the field over Brian Robinson. But there is also a world where the Commanders are able to maybe not keep pace with the Bengals, but stay in the game enough to keep feeding Brian Robinson the football. So yeah, I do not mind him as a start at all this week. He can find your way into your running back 2 spot. Ty, we'll move to you here. Who's your running back start of the week?
I'm opening my heart back up to this. It's Tony Pollard. So this kind of feels like a Brian Robinson for me, because I'm pretty sure I called Tony Pollard to sit last week, and So this one's kind of weird. I'm not gonna lie, talking about Tony Pollard as a start, but Tyjae Spears is dealing with an ankle injury. He said that he'll play, but he also didn't practice on Wednesday, so it's like somebody's lying here. Okay, somebody is trying to tough it out, and their practice status is kind of telling the truth here. So Tony Pollard then, right, even if Spears does play, he's probably not going to be at 100%. That to me feels like just confirmation that Pollard is going to continue seeing the majority share of the backfield that he's been seeing so far this year. Now he gets Green Bay, and most of Green Bay's fantasy points allowed to running back so far came in week 1 against Saquon when they gave up 3 touchdowns to the guy, but they did also just give up 100 rushing yards to Jonathan Taylor. So I think this is one of those, like, gosh, it's gross. It doesn't sound right, doesn't feel right. But again, with the majority share of opportunities that Tony Pollard is getting in this backfield, he's got to find a way into your lineup this week.
And let's just be honest, Brian Callahan cannot be happy with Will Levis. And now you get a matchup where the Green Bay Packers defense is their run defense. Why would you not feed the guy you paid this offseason to just run the football and not make Will Levis make 2 stupid mistakes in back-to-back weeks? Let's not make it a third week. Let's just feed Tony Pollard against a favorable run defense. Cameron, are you in on Tony Pollard this week? You have him as a top 20 play.
Yeah, I am. I think he's, just earned at this point the recognition of being the number 1 in this backfield. And with that, I think they need to run the ball, and he's run enough routes where, he's getting involved in the passing game. Last week, 5 receptions. That was the worry with Pollard, is that he'd come in and it'd be all Tyjae Spears in the run game. Well, if Spears is already banged up, or the receiving game, if Spears is already banged up, going into this one, you got to imagine there's just going to be even more work for Pollard. And, Jonathan Taylor last week had 103 yards against this team on 12 carries. Yeah. So if they run the ball, right, there's going to be lanes open. Pollard's going to find that green grass ahead of him. So yeah, I'd fire up Pollard in this one for sure.
I'll move on to my running back start of the week here. We're going to stick with a blue team, and I'm going to roll out David Montgomery this week. I am a big fan of what Monty has been doing this year. He's always one of my favorite players to talk about. He scored 16 plus in both games to start the season. And now I know the Cardinals have held opposing running backs in check so far this year, but the Bills scampered for 91 yards against them in week 1. And then in week 2, they forced the Rams to play behind in the entire game. You were not going to get a favorable run script. And then you look at that Rams offensive line. They might be the legit worst run blocking offensive line in the league right now. Like, it is not pretty what we're seeing from the Los Angeles Rams out there with all the injuries they have. So I'm really, especially after a loss against the Bucs last week, I'm expecting the lines to come out. Dan Campbell establish that smash mouth, run first football mentality, and frankly just drive the Cardinals defense into the ground here, because I don't think this Cardinals run defense is as good as they've been when you look at the stat sheets over the first 2 weeks of the season. So David Montgomery finds the end zone in this game. Firmly believe that he'll get fed plenty of opportunities. I think they come on and reestablish Detroit Lion Dan Campbell football of, we have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Watch, we're just going to literally drive you into the ground and make you regret trying to block us on defense. Cameron, you've got Monty outside of your top 20, but still a running back 2 play this week. What's your primary concern if there is one?
I don't really have a concern. It's just, I think there's a big group of running backs right there that sure. It's just like, it's just a tier. And so I think he could finish as high, like if I kind of go back through my rankings and, think about it a little bit differently, maybe, I could have him closer to running back 15 or 16. So I think he kind of fits anywhere within that tier this week. He's tied for second with most carries inside the 10-yard line this year. So he's in that same role. That role hasn't changed. He's going to score touchdowns. And the Lions are just running more plays than anybody else. They just are. I mean, they're out there constantly, and I don't think that changes this week against Arizona. I think he's going to have plenty of opportunities.
Ty, what about you? You and I both have him as our running back 19s this week. You in favor of Monty being a positive play?
Yeah, I think that the Lions are smart enough to realize and know that this Arizona offense can put up points. I mean, they put up 28 against Buffalo, and then they put up 41 against the Rams. Now, the Rams defense is pretty much Swiss cheese, but still, like, this Arizona offense is a very good unit. And I think the Lions are smart enough to be like, we're going to keep Kyler Murray and Maserati Marv and Trey McBride, James Conner. We're going to leave all of them on the sideline, and we're just going to run the clock out as much as we can. I mean, that's kind of what happened. I shouldn't say that's exactly what happened in week 1 with the Rams, but I mean, Monty was on the field for just 30 snaps. We got 17 carries. Okay. Yeah. And some of those did come in overtime as well, but like the Lions are comfortable giving Montgomery that many touches if it means keeping the opposing offense off the field. So I think that definitely could happen again this week for Monty. And if he falls into the end zone, it's going to be awesome.
Let's move on to where our running back sits for this week now. Cameron, who's your running back sit?
It's Najee Harris, and he has continued to be the definition of an inefficient runner. He over the last 2 games, he's had 20 and 17 rush attempts. He's failed to crack 75 yards yet in a game, and he's going up against the Chargers defense that has been really tough, especially against the run. They're allowing only 73 rush yards a game on 4.2 yards per carry. That doesn't really sound like, something that gets me excited about Najee Harris. He has seen 2 targets in each game. That's it. So you're not getting any PPR work. Jaylen Warren is just getting back, to becoming healthier. That hamstring's only going to get better the longer, the season goes on. And this Pittsburgh offense is just atrocious again. They've scored 1 touchdown this year. And it was to Darnell Washington. Like, if you were surprised by this, then you haven't watched Arthur Smith be an offensive call plays over the last 3 years. Like, this is the Arthur Smith special, right? That we're going to be 2-0 with 1 offensive touchdown to our backup tight end. Like that is the definition of Arthur Smith. So yeah, I want nothing to do with Najee Harris in this one for sure. I mean, I feel like this game could be 3-0 and I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I had Najee Harris listed as my start last week and did not pull through for me. But at this point, I'm not too interested in any of these Steelers running backs until they give me a reason to believe otherwise. Ty, looks like you're in the same boat, though. You have Najee ranked the highest out of all of us, but and again, Cam has him at 26. I have him at 27. You have him at 25. So it's not like you're in favor of Najee or anything this week.
No, the biggest reason why you need to sit Najee, in my opinion, at least, is because Jaylen Warren is now completely back in the mix. Yeah. Last week, he actually outsnapped Najee Harris, which I think kind of flew under the radar a little bit for some people. So with him back in the mix for sure, Najee is kind of like the Walmart, like David Montgomery in some ways, that like he's going to get just carries, right? He's going to get 14, 15 carries a game, but in an Arthur Smith offense. And it's not a Detroit offense. So yeah, he's going to get touches, but it's not really going to result in anything spectacular or like make you wish you started him.
Just feels like we're getting another typical Najee start to the season as we saw the last 2 years. It's slow and painful, and until they start scoring touchdowns, there's not much to be optimistic about. Ty, who's your running back sit of the week?
I'm kind of going with the low-hanging fruit here. I'm going Zeke. I don't know if you really were over the first 2 weeks, but let this be your confirmation that you really shouldn't start him this week. Baltimore's allowing the 6th fewest points per game to running backs so far this year. They are the 6th highest graded run defense according to Pro Football Focus. Dallas hasn't exactly been great at running the ball this year, like we all kind of expected them to be when you're kind of rolling out a tandem of Zeke and Rico Dowdle. They're actually the 4th worst graded rushing offense according to PFF. So, yeah, really tough defense, not a great offense at running the ball. And yeah, plus we saw an uptick in Rico Dowdle last week. So matchup uncertainty of what this backfield is going to look like in week 3. Like, yeah, again, you probably weren't in the first place, but like, this is an absolute, like you need to look for other options. If Zeke is like next up on your bench, you should go look for other options.
I mean, anything you want to add on top of that, Cameron? There's not even much more I even want to add. Like, that's how out we all are on Zeke.
I would agree. Yep. Good job.
All right, great. I'll move on to my running back sit of the week, which is a guy who actually performed well last week. Devin Singletary is going to be my sit of the week. He scored 14.5 in week 2 against the Commanders, but draws the Browns now in week 3. This was per Michael Fabiano over at Sports Illustrated. In their last home games, Cleveland hasn't allowed a running back to top 52 rushing yards this year, but then in their last 10 home games, their defense has only allowed 4 rushing touchdowns and 68 rushing yards per game. For how bad this New York Giants offense is, I'm good. I don't need to play Devin Singletary this week. There's other higher upside options I'd rather play at this point. And there's a pretty good chance if you're sitting with like a Devin Singletary, you probably have like a J.K. Dobbins on your team that you could play. You probably have a Brian Robinson as well. You're playing Brian Robinson ahead of Devin Singletary. Like, bad matchup. No thanks. Giants offense is bad. I don't know how much more either of you two want to say about that.
Yeah, I think this is going to be in, competition with probably the Steelers Chargers for ugliest game of the week. And I mean, you got 2 quarterbacks who couldn't hit an ocean if they were in a boat. So it's just like, I just want nothing to do with it. And
you're not wrong. That's
I lost.
That's a bar.
Ty lost in the second I said ocean. I couldn't even get through it. And he was already. But yeah, I want nothing to do with it. I want nothing to do with the run game, especially because that is, Cleveland's what they've been good at on defense. So yeah, I agree. Just stay away if you have the ability to.
We've seen Singletary in a matchup like this against a tough defense in Minnesota in week 1.
Yeah.
Like, he got 10 carries, 4 receptions for 9.2 fantasy points.
Yeah.
So just because like they're going to try to get him the ball does not mean that like it's going to turn out to be anything great. So yeah, we should definitely be pivoting off of Singletary.
Let's take a quick break on that, fellas. We'll be back with our wide receiver starts and sits and our tight end starts and sits after a quick break. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we're back. We have covered our quarterback and running back starts and sits of the week. Let's move on to the pass catchers now, fellas, and start with the wide receivers. Cameron, who's your wide receiver start of the week?
Jameson Williams. And he was somebody that I thought I was going to be so out on this year. I really did. And he has proved me wrong. And it's fun to watch. Right. Yeah, but he's been fun to watch on the field. He's top 5 in targets so far this season. And I think the big thing too is he's no longer just a deep threat. Right. I think that was what we kind of relegated him to, was just this, hey, he's the guy that, Jared Goff's just going to bomb at 50 yards down the field. He's going to catch it and score a touchdown, which he's had 2 long catches, 1 in each game, but only 4 of his 19 targets so far have come from 20 yards or further down the field. They're using him across the middle. They're using him in great ways. And we talked about it. I think you guys talked about it yesterday on the trade targets video. And then we talked about it on Tuesday as well, that he's just taking targets from Sam Laporta. He's really been hurting Sam Laporta because they're using Jameson Williams. And then Amon-Ra could potentially miss this game, or at least not be 100% in this one. Arizona's pass defense, then, who he's playing this week, has looked, actually not that bad against wide receivers until you realize Cooper Kupp was the only major wide receiver name that they've faced, since the beginning of the season, playing both Buffalo and Los Angeles. And Kupp left in the second quarter after already having 4 catches for 39 yards. So I think, I don't think that tells the whole story of how good they've been as a pass defense. And I think that Detroit's just realizing, hey, more we can get this guy involved, the better it is for our team.
Yeah, JMO has to be in your lineup at this point. They are utilizing him in too many different ways. He's getting too many efficient looks at the football in his hands. And Ben Johnson has said, all right, this is a time where we're going to cut loose our 4-3 speed guy and watch him get to work on the football field that we traded up to the 12th overall pick to get. Yeah, JMO should absolutely be in your lineup as a start this week. And you're in agreement, Ty.
Very much so. And again, if this game is going to be a shootout, that means that these receivers are going to be involved. And again, with how they've been utilizing Jameson Williams, like, there really is no reason to doubt.
We'll kick it right back over to you then, Ty. Who's your wide receiver start of the week?
It's Brandon Ayuk. Yeah, the guy that was on a snap count in week 1, or I should say playing on limited snaps in week 1, but week 2 against Minnesota, he was back to full-time status. And now Deebo Samuel is going to be out for a couple weeks because of an ankle injury. Is that what I don't remember what
I'll confirm, but keep going.
Calf strain.
He's out a couple weeks. So
calf strain.
This is now Brandon Ayuk's wide receiver room. Really, like, outside of him, it's Juwan Jennings, who has contributed, but he's definitely like the better NFL reality contributor than he is on anything in fantasy. Yeah, George Kittle will still be there. Jordan Mason will still will still run really well, like he has the past 2 weeks. But it's Brandon Ayuk's time now at this point, right? Like, we are about to see him get going. We've talked about when you hold out during the offseason for a contract and you don't come back until right before the start of the season, there's going to be a ramp up period. I feel like we've been in the ramp up period. And I think this is a week where Ayuk kind of gets back to the production that we were seeing last year. And he gets a prime matchup to do so against the Rams. So, yes, is there, the possibility that San Francisco just, gives another 28 carries to Jordan Mason? Absolutely. And that Ayuk isn't necessarily needed, but I think all three of us are anticipating that this is going to be kind of the welcome back game for Brandon Ayuk in fantasy football.
I mean, even in a game they lost to Minnesota last week, George Kittle had a day, Jordan Mason had a day, and Deebo Samuel had a day. Brandon Ayuk was the odd man out there. So now you eliminate Deebo Samuel from the equation. There's still room for Brandon Ayuk to go ahead and just have himself a day, because if the 49ers are truly going to rout the Los Angeles Rams, could it be a Jordan Mason 30-point fantasy day? Absolutely. But I find it hard to believe Brandon Ayuk doesn't benefit massively from the Deebo Samuel absence. That's how this equation has always worked in San Francisco. And Cameron, you're in agreement. You're part of the trio here of all of us that has him ranked as a top 12 wide receiver this week.
Yeah, Deebo's seen 19 targets over the last 2 weeks, and all of a sudden he's gone. So this target's got to go somewhere. And like Ty said, Brandon Ayuk's back to full time. So I would assume, Brock Purdy's going to be back to trusting him again, just like he did last season.
I'll move on to my wide receiver start of the week. I hate to talk about another early round guy you drafted, but this is more so a vote of confidence as my start of the week. I am fully endorsing Chris Olave as my start of the week. I know it's been a slow start to the season, but as we talked about yesterday, Ty, and when you said to go out and buy Chris Olave, we were literally 3 feet away, less than 3 feet away from having a 19-point fantasy day instead of a 13-point fantasy day. That's the biggest thing here with Chris Olave. 16 total fantasy points isn't what you're hoping for in the first 2 weeks of the season here, but this Eagles team is the perfect game for him to get back on track. They still haven't fixed their secondary woes. They've allowed the third most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this year. And look, let's just ride this New Orleans wave early on in the season until we lose. Like, why wouldn't we continue to ride how hot this offense is? So until the Eagles figure it out in their secondary, they've got the pieces to figure it out. But when we see when these NFL teams repiece together their secondaries, it takes them 4, 5, 6 games to actually gel together as a unit, and we're seeing that clear as day with the Eagles. So they're still struggling. The Saints offense is hot. Full endorsement of Chris Olave here. I would be willing to bet he finds the end zone at home this week. You two are both in agreement. Ty, you have him as a top 15 wide receiver, just as I do as well.
Yeah, this Saints offense is kind of primed to have a great game against Philly. Philly runs, here's full like stat nerd for you. Philly runs cover 3 at the 6th highest rate in the league. Derek Carr so far is the quarterback 6 against cover 3. So again, this is a matchup that plays into New Orleans' favor. Olave should get going here. Yeah, Shaheed, I'm fairly high in Shaheed. We're not going to talk about him today, but like I'm significantly higher on Shaheed than you guys are for this week. That's just because, again, I think this New Orleans offense can kind of keep the streak going a little bit in terms of efficiency and stuff. Again, we're not going to see 40 points, but hey, they're going to keep this game close.
Cameron, what about you? You like Chris Olave this week, or are you wondering if he's going to have another, 13-point game, or we're just going to be left unsatisfied again?
No, I really like Chris Olave again on the season. Right now, he's the 5th highest ranked wide receiver according to PFF. So, he's doing something right out on the field. Derek Carr's been hot. And it's just, they've just struggled against passing attacks. And, Jaden Reed sliced him up week 1. Drake London, didn't exactly have like a bonkers week last week, but, he still kind of had his way, especially at the end of the game. And so, yeah, I would continue to play Chris Olave with confidence. I think, last week was a good week. Like, I think we just get so numb to sometimes like, oh, it wasn't 18 points. It was a bad week. And it's like,
right.
No, the dude still had, what was it, 4 catches for 90 yards or something like that? So it's just like, let's settle down. He's fine. And now he's got a good matchup. So yeah, put him in your lineup.
All right, let's move on to the wide receiver sits now, fellas. Cameron, who's your wide receiver sit this week?
It's Terry McLaurin, and he's playing Cincinnati, who is only allowed 180 yards to wide receivers on the season. They played Kansas City well last week, right? I think Rashee Rice had 1 big catch, and other than that, they just really didn't do much against that Kansas City against the Cincinnati defense. You look at Pat Mahomes, what was the next gen stats is like passing chart or whatever. What is the name for that? But passing chart.
Yeah.
I think he only had 4 completions past the line of scrimmage in that game. Yeah. 6 completions. There you go. Which is just wild to think about for Patrick Mahomes. So I trust them. And on the season, Terry McLaurin. This is his season stats so far. 8 catches for 39 yards. 8 catches. He has 39 yards on the season with 8 catches. This is the definition of the horizontal raid by Cliff Kingsbury. This is what he does to wide receivers. And so, just Jaden Daniels hasn't quite clicked fully, passing the ball. He's got an offensive coordinator that just doesn't want Terry to be used down the field. So I would stay away from Terry in this one.
This is a masterpiece, like hang in the Louvre masterpiece of why when a situation automatically seems in favor of a player, these offensive coordinator changes matter so much. We're seeing it with the New Orleans Saints right now. We're seeing it with the Washington Commanders where Jahan Dotson leaves and people are like, Terry might literally have 160 targets this year and he'll volume his way to a top finish. But you have to remember Cliff Kingsbury. Like, yeah, he made it work with DeAndre Hopkins, but this offense is just putrid. And Ty, you're the lowest on Terry McLaurin out of all 3 of us this week.
It's just because like there's no way. Like I think Terry is eventually going to get going. I mean, again, we call this offense the horizontal raid, but last week they actually kind of threw the ball downfield a little bit. I mean, he had 9 pass attempts of 10 yards or more downfield. So I'm just saying, like, don't look down.
We're getting there.
Jaden Daniels is getting going. But again, it feels like Terry, again, 8 catches, 39 yards on the year. It feels like Terry is just not being utilized as a guy that like Jaden can rely on over the middle of the field or downfield at all. I really just don't want any piece of the passing game. I really just want the rushing side of this offense.
We'll leave it at that and come right back to you, Ty. Who's your wide receiver sit this week?
It's Michael Pittman Jr. If you have the luxury to sit Michael Pittman Jr., you should, but you'll likely have to start him if you don't have that luxury. It's just not a good matchup. With what we've seen so far from Anthony Richardson, the passer, like, yeah, he's had some highlight throws. Again, I'm going to bring up the week 1 throw against Houston where he slips and he's fading away and it's a 60-yard dot to Alec Pierce.
Yeah.
But there's the other side of Richardson where, again, he literally just threw 3 picks. Now 1 pick was a Hail Mary at the end of the game, but still, like, Richardson did not look good against Green Bay last week as a passer. It's not a great matchup for Richardson again as the passer going up against Chicago. Michael Pittman plays 76% of snaps out wide so far this year. So he's going to draw one of Jalen Johnson or Tyreek Stevenson. And I just don't like that matchup for Pittman. I don't think Richardson is going to be able to kind of rely on Pittman as a safety valve just because we know that Pittman is, not so much a downfield guy. And so far this year, I don't think he's topped more than 3 catches in a game. He's finished outside the top 36, I want to say. If someone wants to confirm that for me, but this Colts passing offense isn't clicking just yet. And going up against Chicago this week, I don't think this is the week where it officially gets going. It's a good secondary. It's a good pass rush. I think if you have the ability and the luxury of pivoting off of Pittman and you've got someone else, I think that's the way to go. But this may be just one of those you're just stuck with, and he's probably going to give you 8 or 9, and that's just going to be how it is.
Pittman has drawn 8 targets in week 1, caught 4 of them for 31 yards, 7 targets in week 2, caught 3 of them for 21 yards. He has finished as the wide receiver 58 and the wide receiver 63 to start the season. Cameron, you're the highest on Pittman. Again, not like you're crazy higher than us, but I also know you've been the most outspoken on Michael Pittman this year in terms of your dislike of him in drafts. That's coming to fruition, so I got to imagine you're on board with this.
Yeah, it's just, Richardson is tied for 30th right now in completions with 26 on the season. He's completing less than 50% of passes. So it's like you might go, hey, Pittman's seeing 8 targets a game. That's awesome. And yeah, that's great, but he's only going to catch 50% of them. And those long bombs down the field, those aren't going to Pittman. Those are going to A.D. Mitchell or Alec Pierce. And so it's like he's not even getting the high value targets necessarily. He's not getting the volume that you were hoping to see over the last couple of seasons. And when he does see it, it's down to a 50-50 chance that the ball's even on target for him. So it's like, I haven't seen anything from Anthony Richardson where I feel like, hey, this accuracy thing is going to be solved overnight. Hey, they're going to start airing it out every single down with Anthony Richardson. It's like, no, they're going to continue to run the ball. He's going to put he's going to keep the ball in his hands, and he's just going to be, throwing it all, just throwing it around a ton. So yeah, I just don't really have any confidence in Pittman.
Josh Downs could be back this week too. So
correct.
Like another change to that passing offense that just need to see it 1 week.
Yep. That is a good note to add there. I was going to make sure we covered that as well, because Josh Downs should be back in this lineup. My wide receiver sit this week, Christian Kirk. You cannot start a dude who had -1 receiving yards last week without Evan Ingram to take away everything underneath from him. I mean, this is like a nightmare of all nightmares for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like, this was one of my fears coming into the season, that year 3 of Doug Peterson running the show, are we going to get the same thing as we did on his way out of Philadelphia, where it's like, it seems like all the pieces are here. How in the world are we not making this work? And that's just what the Jacksonville Jaguars feel like. Kirk only has 2 catches on the season, and one of them went for 30 yards in week 1. So honestly, this could be a whole heck of a lot worse right now. So there was a legitimate chance us 3 believed that Brian Thomas Jr. actually could be the best wide receiver on this team, and that is 100% coming true at the start of the season. So I just have zero interest in Christian Kirk until further notice. I mean, he can comfortably sit on my bench, and I will play probably, where do I have him ranked? 36. I honestly would probably play at least 40 other wide receivers over him this week because I just don't think he has that much upside. And Tyler, I mean, my gosh, you have him at wide receiver 48. So you would play at least 47 other wide receivers ahead of him this week.
What is Christian Kirk giving you? What is this offense giving you that gives you any confidence in any of them outside of ETN? Like Brian Thomas, like we like the talent. Feels like he's kind of being held back a little bit by this offense. Like there's really no one that you can trust in this offense again besides ETN, and that's not even a guarantee. Like Tank Bigsby left with an injury in week 2. Maybe that backfield is going to be split now moving forward if Bigsby is going to be healthy. Like there is so much that could go wrong still with this Jacksonville offense that it's just like, why would you put any stock or why would you trust it in any way?
Cameron, anything you want to add on top of that?
Yeah, I just said that Anthony Richardson was tied for 30th in a completion so far this season. The guy that's tied with him is Trevor Lawrence, who's completing 51% of his passes. It just is so gross. And, Buffalo has, they just got done just absolutely steamrolling Miami. I don't really see them slowing down for this Jacksonville game. And it's a bummer. This was an offense I was kind of excited for. I thought, they're going to return to form, and they just have not. So, yeah, I'd stay away from Christian Kirk till further notice.
I mean, Trevor Lawrence still does so many things right on tape. I mean, Ben Solak of ESPN posted a video breaking down, Trevor Lawrence going through his progression, shifting his base last minute to hit Gabe Davis on a crossing route where he just sat down in the middle of the field on. I mean, it was beautiful stuff from Trevor Lawrence, but it's like, man, this offense can just not put it together right now. So it stinks because I still love Trevor Lawrence. I'm still a Trevor Lawrence believer. I still have plenty of stock, but I don't know how long I can continue to defend Trevor Lawrence in this offense if they can't get it together here. Let's wrap up with tight ends, fellas, here. It's been I don't even have a word for the tight end landscape this year. It's been barf. I think that's the word I'm going to use. I'm just going to use the word barf. So let's talk starts and sits for as little as we can. Cameron, who's your tight end start of the week?
Yeah, I didn't get gross with it. I'm not even attempting. It's Kyle Pitts, and he's got maybe the most favorable matchup for any tight end this week. Kansas City is currently allowing 138 yards per game to tight ends this season.
It's crazy.
138. They give 111 to Likely, and then they give up 90 to Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki had 90 yards against him. If Kyle Pitts can't get it going in this game, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to absolutely
we need to sound the alarms then. Yeah.
Yes. It's just like, this is the game where he should truly get it going. And, if you were worried about Kirk Cousins and if you watched that game, he looked more comfortable. I don't think he's quite back to, 100%, comfort, but that drive he led at the end of the game should give you confidence moving forward that, hey, Atlanta at least will function better than what we saw last season.
Cam has officially endorsed Kyle Pitts, just as I have officially endorsed Chris Olave. I mean, Ty, you have him ranked the highest out of all of us. You love Kyle Pitts this week.
Again, the matchup, it's a home game for Atlanta with a great matchup. And with how this tight end, position has looked so far, like Pitts could just have 4 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown, and he's a top 5 tight end on the week.
Right. It doesn't take much to be a top 5, top 7 tight end right now, which is why, Ty, you and I are getting a little bit grosser with our tight end starts. But, if you're without an Njoku or a Ferguson this week, these are 2 guys you could pull off your waiver wire still.
Hunter Henry. I will just say he's coming off a game with 12 targets, 8 catches. And I think in a game where we're going to see more of out of New England. Again, week 1, he only had 2 catches on 3 targets, but that's because Ramondre Stevenson literally could not be stopped, right? And they're playing from ahead. I think New England is going to be a much more favorable scripts to a guy like Hunter Henry because there is no wide receiver one on that team, Hunter Henry is essentially the wide receiver one here. I maybe the best way to say it is this. I want to hear, because there was potential for some debate in our group chat earlier today, because Cam said that Hunter Henry was going to be his sit. So here, I'll turn it over to you, Cam. Why is Hunter Henry a sit for you?
I still think this Jets defense is pretty legit. And this is something he did last year where he looked really good for the first 2 weeks and then just disappeared again into irrelevance. And his quarterback's Jacoby Brissett. So I'm not going to count on any consistency out of Jacoby Brissett. But like you said, the tight end landscape is so gross that at the same time, I think you do kind of have to chase the targets. And you have to go with, you know what? Nobody else has given me any sign of hope. Let's chase it. And if you get 3 points out of Henry this week, you are going to get 3 points out of whoever you started anyway. So it's like, might as well chase the upside that we saw last week.
Alex Van Pelt comes from a system that just loves to pepper the tight end with targets. So I think this could be a trend going forward that we see of Alex Van Pelt without a true wide receiver one. Let's just make things easy for Jacoby Brissett and feed Hunter Henry underneath. The tight end's a safety blanket here. Let's take advantage of that. So I definitely don't mind Hunter Henry as a start of the week. I have him as my tight end 9, so I'm in the same boat with you, Ty. I'm going to get a little bit more gross for my start of the week than Hunter Henry. You talked about the guy who dominated the Chiefs last week, Cameron. Mr. Mike Gesicki, he is going to be my tight end start of the week. Now, there are only 6 tight ends averaging more than 10 fantasy points per game through 2 weeks.
Oh my!
Can you guess who they are? I'll give you one. Mike Gesicki is one of them.
Bowers has got to be one.
Bowers is one of them.
Kittle
is one of them.
Oh, I don't
Likely still.
Isaiah Likely is still one of them.
Oh yeah, he's got to be. Oh, there's got to be some just nasty name.
Hunter Henry is one of them. There's one more obvious one.
Obvious, or like?
Oh, McBride.
Trey McBride is the other one. Yep. Those are your 6 tight ends that are averaging more than 10 fantasy points per game.
So
as of right now.
We need a barf sound. Like
yeah, that's what we really need. Can we actually here we'll substitute this for the tight end position for right now. That's the tight end position in fantasy football, right? Yeah, can we get a barf of womp womp somewhere in there? Washington this year has actually been statistically good against tight ends, but that's until you realize they played the Giants last week, who are running out rookie Theo Johnson, and the Bucs in week 1, who Cade Otton has never been a tight end to get overly involved. Go ahead, you got bright eyed there, Ty, when I mentioned Cade Otton.
I think we have our new nominee for Cardio King. And it's Cade Otton.
Yeah.
Alec Pierce is actually producing. Cade Otton is the official cardio king of 2024.
But yeah, you got Cade Otton, who they don't look to utilize. You also had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in that game. But Mike Gesicki, as long as T. Higgins is out, they might have him back this week, TBD. But like Gesicki is going to continue operating as like a faux slot wide receiver for this team at the tight end position. That's all Mike Gesicki is. He is just an enormous slot wide receiver. He doesn't actually play the tight end position. So if Higgins is going to continue to miss time, like I'll roll him out as a streamer against the league's worst secondary if he's going to play slot wide receiver for this team. So again, for how bad the tight end position has been, I'm going to go ahead and chase the upside, because you're right, Cameron. The difference between the tight end 10 and the tight end 32 on the week is probably going to be like 2.5 fantasy points.
I just was looking where the PFF has Cade Otton ranked for receiving tight ends. He's ranked as the 69th best tight end.
Oh, nice.
Behind Johnny Munt and John Bates.
Oh no.
Dude is buried.
Oh man.
There are only 8 tight ends worse than him in the NFL.
Oh, man.
Cardio.
Or what else for Cade Otton, man? Oh, glad I dumped him in Dynasty. Let's breeze through tight end sits of the week, because let's be honest, these are the guys who we would rather just not play because they don't have much upside. Well, I guess we'll have to maybe debate about ties, but Cameron Years, I bet is just purely like, I don't see the upside here. Shoot for a player with higher upside.
Yeah, it's Dallas Goedert, and it's just honestly part of it is just I needed somebody at a sit of the week who's relevant enough that you're just not like he's not even on someone's team in my league. It's like there's only like 13 tight ends who are even on people's teams. Everybody else is under 50% rosters. So I'm just like trying to find somebody that, hey, you know what? He's actually rostered. So yeah, it's Dallas Goedert is maybe he has a little bit of upside with AJ Brown out this week. But it just feels like I don't know. You probably have to start him. It's
Right.
I guess this is more of the DFS. If you're like looking, hey, cheap tight end option, Dallas Goedert, stay away. Because let's be honest, unless you're sitting with a top 8 tight end, you have to start him. But if you can pivot, I would in this one.
I think the only reason why I'm still interested in Dallas Goedert is if the Eagles are, I don't know if they'll be chasing points in this game, but if this game is a back and forth shootout, high scoring game, I got to imagine Goddard gets involved if AJ Brown is going to be out. When it was against the Falcons, it's like, I'm just not too interested, but which he ended up panning out last week. But again, when there's only like 12 tight ends that are on people's teams, unfortunately, Dallas Goedert is one of them. Who are you going to play over him? Like, we still have him ranked ahead of the majority of the guys, but I'd be willing to play Hunter Henry over Dallas Goedert this week. I'd rather chase that upside. But Ty, I'll go to you for your tight end sit of the week. I don't want to spend too much time on these, except for yours, because yours fascinates me.
Yeah, Isaiah Likely is my sit. This is one where, this could actually make me look like a complete moron for saying that he's a sit because, most of this take of sitting Isaiah Likely is coming off of what happened last week, where Isaiah Likely went from a 66% snap share to a 49% snap share. Now, that is, tight end snaps were down for all the tight ends. It wasn't just Isaiah Likely in Baltimore, but if it's not going to be a high scoring game, which this game could be going up against Dallas again, which could make this absolutely backfire on me. There is the sudden drastic change in the snap share and snap count for Likely makes me pause enough to say, like, I might, like, if Hunter Henry is available on my waivers, I might go just start Hunter Henry instead and just kind of see how this Baltimore offense is for another week, just because we thought that the 2 tight end usage was going to continue for Baltimore. That was the reason for adding a guy like Likely to your team, and it didn't really continue last week against Vegas. So this is more so me, in my preference, wanting to see another week of what Baltimore can do with 2 tight ends, if it's going to be similar to week 2 or if it's going to go back to kind of week 1. And if it goes back to week 1, Likely could be an absolutely great play. But if it goes back to week 2, might see another repeat of what we saw last week.
Curious to see how this Mike Zimmer defense comes out, because they got humiliated by New Orleans last week after looking really, really good in week 1. So I'm curious to see how he comes out this week and tries to defend this Baltimore Ravens offense that has a lot of different ways they can beat you, but also, like, we thought the Saints were going to struggle with their offensive line. I don't know if I can say that about Baltimore, where it's like, yeah, I'm not very confident in their offensive line, but is that also a reason why I should believe more in Isaiah Likely, with quick dump offs? Like, I'm curious to see how this Mike Zimmer defense comes out. But the reason why Isaiah Likely is still ranked high enough for me is that, tight end desperate managers went out and spent the fab on him. Like, you're kind of handcuffed into playing him at this point. We did it to ourselves. If you went out and spent the fab on Likely, but he's one that I'll be watching for sure this week to see which way his snaps go. My tight end sit of the week, I'll wrap it up here, fellas. Dalton Schultz. Let's just keep this short and simple. When you've got Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Joe Mixon, who are all getting touches, there's just no need for Dalton Schultz to be prioritized whatsoever. I know Kittle put up 20 against Minnesota last week, but let's be honest, that isn't going to be the Houston Texans this week. Dalton Schultz is not playing a George Kittle kind of role where he's going to be frequently involved in this passing attack. So too many other weapons at CJ Stroud's disposal. No need to prioritize Dalton Schultz. I'd much rather shoot for higher upside plays this week, and I'll leave it at that.
Yep.
We'll wrap it out there. Do either of you two want to add anything on Dalton Schultz? I assume not. We're all in
No.
agreement.
We might be too high on him, to be completely honest. Like, it's
Fair
not
enough.
great for Schultz.
Fair enough. Look, if you enjoyed the content, make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications as well. If you have any start-sit questions, the number one place to ask those is over on our Discord. We have a large community over there that is blowing up our feed daily. People posting questions, different polls, trades, start-sit questions, waiver wire decisions, everything of the sorts. Join our Discord. We're going to run some more exclusive giveaways over there. We just got done running our 300K, 500K follower giveaway. So thanks for those of you who joined and have helped make our Discord a super fun community for followers of the Fantasy Football Fellas. We'll be back next week. Actually, we'll be live on Sunday. Tyler will be going live on Sunday on the YouTube to answer all of your final start-sit questions for week 1. Otherwise, we'll be back next week with more Panic Meter, more trades, and more make or break players. You can follow us on the socials. I'm at Lucas Wenzel, at CamLawFFF for Cameron, Tyler_Plath for Tyler over on Twitter. You can follow the Fellas pages as well. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. We'll see y'all next week. Enjoy week 3. Deuces.
Deuces.